Doctor Strange's reality-altering memory wipe left Peter Parker entirely alone. Without Tony Stark's billions or the Avengers' backing, Peter is operating completely off the grid. But the recent trailer for Brand New Day shows biological changes that don't match his standard abilities. We see Peter emerging from a web cocoon, sporting pitch-black eyes and firing organic webbing directly from his wrists. These specific visuals align with two of the most notoriously convoluted eras in Spider-Man comic history, One More Day and Brand New Day. Understanding the upcoming movie requires weighing these internet theories against Marvel's most controversial editorial history. Many fans point to the man-spider theory, suggesting that the extreme psychological stress of losing his friends is triggering a feral, uncontrolled mutation. However, a more accurate comic counterpart exists in a 2005 arc known as The Other. In The Other, fatal physical trauma triggers a mystical rebirth. Peter sheds his old body, encases himself in a massive web cocoon, and connects with a cosmic spider deity. The abilities Peter gains in that story match the trailer exactly. He develops night vision, explaining the jet black eyes, and begins generating his own organic webbing. This mutation removes the need for Stark-branded web shooters. It redefines Peter as a self-sustaining totemic patiti, rather than a tech-reliant Avenger. The casting of Sadie Sink has fueled speculation that the MCU is introducing a young Jean Grey, primarily due to her hair color and psychic-looking visual effects in the trailer. But a mutant crossover ignores a character engineered directly for the Brand New Day comic era, a superheroine named Jackpot. This diagram traces the Jackpot powers. The second Jackpot, Alana Jobson, lacked natural abilities. She synthesized super strength by ingesting a toxic mutant growth hormone cocktail. Marvel used the character as a deliberate trick, adding Mary Jane Watson's silhouette and red hair to fool readers. Sadie Sink reportedly underwent intense physical training for this role, mirroring the way Alana Jobson had to manufacture a superhero physique through chemistry. Her character points to a story grounded in the world of street-level chemical enhancements, rather than the X-Men. This leads to the trailer's unseen dangers. We see MJ with a mysterious new character, sparking rumors of the returning Osborns, or perhaps Paul Rabin, the character who famously displaced Peter in the comics. These elements point toward the architect of the original Brand New Day timeline, Mephisto, the literal devil of the Marvel Universe. In the One More Day storyline, Mephisto saved Aunt May's life, but only in exchange for erasing Peter and Mary Jane's marriage from history. Years later, it was revealed that Mephisto wanted the marriage gone to prevent the birth of Peter's daughter, Mayday Parker, who was prophesied to eventually dethrone him. If Mephisto is the danger mentioned in the trailer, Peter is defending the existence of his future family from demonic orchestration. These theories, biological mutations, synthetic drugs, and reality-warping entities, form a single cohesive threat. The unifying thread across these comic eras is the removal of Peter's safety nets, forcing him into a state of unassisted survival. The MCU is using these controversial storylines to create a landscape of isolation, where no help is coming and every choice carries weight. This version of Brand New Day forces Peter Parker to evolve. His survival now depends on his own internal strength, rather than the technology he left behind.
Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are diving into something absolutely wild. We're going to untangle the incredibly complex and, let's be honest, often controversial comic book lore that directly inspired that explosive new MCU Spider-Man trailer. If you've seen the footage, you already know things look vastly different for Peter Parker right now. But to truly grasp where the cinematic universe is taking him next, we have to look back at the comic history it's pulling from. And wow, it is a history filled with demonic deals, crazy retcons, and literally some of the most debated storylines of all time. Here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll start with a brand new MCU era, then look back at Spidey's most hated stories, unpack the Kindred Saga retcon, see how they're translating lore to screen, and finish up with the future of the Spider. Let's get right into it. Now, as we jump into this material, there's one massive question we gotta ask ourselves. How do you actually fix the most hated story in comic book history? I want you to keep that in the back of your mind as we look at the MCU's bold new direction for Peter, picking up 4 years after he asked Doctor Strange to cast that devastating spell, making everyone, even his absolute best friends, forget he ever existed.
Section 1, a brand new MCU era, picking up the pieces.
So we're picking up right alongside a deeply isolated Peter Parker. The guy is completely cut off from his former life. He's literally doom-scrolling social media just to watch Ned and MJ at MIT, and he's leaning entirely into just being Spider-Man. Now, what's fascinating is that the MCU borrows the title of the highly controversial 2008 comic era Brand New Day, but they completely remix his misery. In those 2008 comics, the focus was mostly on Peter being single, super broke, and working as this sleazy paparazzi. It was a status quo shift meant to grab younger readers, but man, it frustrated a lot of longtime fans. The MCU takes that core clean slate concept, but roots it in the tragic sacrifice he made back in his college years. He's forgotten by his friends, and on top of that, undergoing intense physical changes, like suddenly gaining organic webs. And man, does this show what a wild ride we're in for. The trailer just rapidly fires off Easter eggs that hardcore comic fans are going to instantly spot. I mean, we're getting the live-action debut of Frank Castle's heavily armed battle van. That is a concept first introduced way back in a 1975 comic. We also see the strange webbing cocoon, the return of those organic webs, Peter fighting actual hand ninjas, and Michael Mando finally returning as Mac Gargan, stepping up as the Scorpion. It is just a massive escalation for our favorite street-level hero.
Moving on to Section 2, Spidey's most hated stories, alienating the fanbase.
If we look at the real-world publication history, you'll see readers endured some heavily criticized plotlines for years, stories that just seem to fundamentally misunderstand or even damage Peter Parker's world. It really started with Sins Past in 2004, then hit an absolute boiling point with One More Day in 2007, transitioned into the Brand New Day era in 2008, and finally saw this huge attempt at a cleanup with the Kindred Saga, which wrapped up in 2021.
Okay, we really need to talk about how bizarre these stories got. Take Sins Past from 2004. So the original writer actually wanted Peter and Gwen to have had kids, but editorial mandate stepped in, saying Peter absolutely had to remain a virgin at that point in his history. So what did they do? They forced this wild rewrite where the angelic Gwen Stacy secretly had an affair with the decades-older, villainous Norman Osborn. This resulted in superpowered twins with accelerated aging. There's even a deeply uncomfortable scene where Peter actually digs up his dead girlfriend's DNA just to verify it. Fans grew literally physically ill at the thought of this storyline.
But wait, it actually got worse. In 2007's One More Day, Marvel editorial decided they wanted to get rid of Peter's 20-year marriage to Mary Jane. And how did they pull that off? Well, Peter trades his marriage to the demon Mephisto to save Aunt May from a gunshot wound. Which forces the ultimate question, in what world does Peter Parker make a deal with the devil? Fans felt this completely betrayed his core ethos of power and responsibility. It was pretty much a universally despised solution to a problem that fans didn't even think existed in the first place.
All right, Section 3, the Kindred Saga Retcon, cleaning up the mess.
So how do you clean up a mess like that? Well, writer Nick Spencer basically fought comic book madness with, you guessed it, even more comic book madness. During his massive 74-issue run, he introduced this terrifying behind-the-scenes villain called Kindred. For the longest time, readers thought it was a resurrected Gwen Stacy or maybe Harry Osborn, but the big reveal? Prepare yourself for this. Kindred was actually a clone duo of Sarah and Gabriel, manipulated by an evil artificial intelligence version of Harry Osborn as part of this incredibly elaborate revenge scheme against his father.
And the Kindred Saga finally myth-busted that ugly past. It revealed that Gwen and Norman never actually had an affair. That whole thing, just a lie implanted by Mephisto. It turns out Mephisto was orchestrating all this misery, including bringing clone versions of characters to life, for one very specific reason. He wasn't just trying to make Peter unhappy. Mephisto fears the future. Specifically, he's terrified of Mayday Parker, Peter and MJ's future daughter. She is prophesied to defeat him and prevent his conquest of Earth. So he erased the marriage just to stop her from being born. Mind-blowing, right?
Which brings us to Section 4, translating lore to screen. What the MCU is keeping.
Okay, so back to the trailer. We see Peter waking up outside his apartment in just his boxers, falling out of this massive web cocoon, and boom, he suddenly realizes he has organic webbing. This is a direct, huge nod to a mid-2000s mystic rebirth storyline called The Other.
In that comic arc, under immense stress and literally facing death, Peter undergoes a metamorphosis inside a cocoon on the Brooklyn Bridge. When he emerges, he's got enhanced abilities like organic webs, night vision, and even wrist stingers. It really looks like the MCU is leaning heavily into this totemic, animalistic evolution of his powers.
You can totally tell the filmmakers are massive comic nerds because they are lovingly recreating classic covers frame by frame on screen. Just look at this breakdown. We get a shot of Spidey swinging with someone tucked under his arm that perfectly mirrors his 1962 debut in Amazing Fantasy #15. We see a gorgeous slow-motion battle with the villain Boomerang straight off the cover of Amazing Spider-Man #345, and a boat fight with the claw-footed tarantula replicating his debut in issue 134. It's just so cool to see. But of course, the trailer leaves us with so many tantalizing questions. Like at this party in Ned and MJ's apartment, we see MJ being flirted with by the actor Eman Esfandi. Is he playing the MCU's version of Harry Osborn? Or, and this would be hilarious, could he be Paul Rabin? You know, the incredibly unpopular comic character who MJ dated while trapped in an alternate dimension? We also see Sadie sink amidst all these computer screens. Rumors suggest she could be a multiversal threat or even the X-Men's Jean Grey. And who is the legendary actor Keith David narrating as? Could he actually be the spider deity known as the Other?
And finally, Section 5. Future of the Spider. The emotional core remains.
Let's bring all this crazy sci-fi magic back down to reality for a second. Because despite the clones, the literal deals with the devil, and the memory-wiping spells, there's a really poignant quote on Aunt May's tombstone in the trailer: "When you help someone, you help everyone." Even stripped of his friends and his entire identity, that fundamental sense of responsibility is exactly what pushes him to put the mask back on. It's the beating heart of his character.
And right at the very end of the trailer, we get this brief, heartbreaking moment between Peter and MJ. She still has no idea who he is, right? But she is still wearing that broken black dahlia necklace he gave her back in Far From Home. So it leaves us with this one final provocative question to ponder until the movie hits theaters. Will that necklace be the key to sparking her memories and undoing the spell? Or is Peter Parker truly destined to face this brand new day entirely alone? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. I honestly cannot wait to see how this all unfolds.